aiming to build the legacies for future generations.
What would you say is unique to construction companies when it comes to change management?
It's resistance to change. You can have the best idea on the planet, but until you have the money and the people to put it in, that is always going to be problems.
How does trust play a role in change management? Welcome back to the Contech Onsite podcast. I'm super excited to invite Elizabeth Pearson. Elizabeth is based in the UAE and is a director of change management at AECOM. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much.
Okay, so Elizabeth, can you please introduce yourself and tell us about AECOM and how you got to your position today?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Elizabeth Pearson. I'm based in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi, and I've been here for a while. I work for AECOM, and we're an infrastructure consulting firm, aiming to build the legacies for future generations. We're in over 40 countries. I think we have around 60,000 people, and we work through from digitalization projects to airports to dams to environment, and protecting our waterways on our coastal lines, and we do that across the board. I started with them a few years ago now. Well, time marches, about 10 years ago, just helping out with a project in freight in Abu Dhabi, more on the marketing side, helping them build the strategy for that program, which was an intergovernment program. But I then came back in to help them out when someone was off for a while to be a regional Marcoms director. And after I finished that contract, I think it was a maternity contract, I decided to get into change, because what I could see was that when the company wanted to move direction or implement a new way of thinking, a new way of culture, a new culture, what they would do is just ask comms to send out an edict, and assume that everyone would read it, and then everyone would immediately change their behavior. And that's what comms channels, this is not typical to just AECOM, this is typical across the board, that we know something needs to change, so we tell people to change. But I felt intuitively it was more than that. So I got in touch with Warwick Business School, and they were running a postgrad diploma on organizational change. So I did that for a couple of years, and I came back into AECOM and worked on a strategy, client experience, and innovation. And then I settled into my role now, which is director on global projects. Mainly, we do digitalization projects, but also financial transformation.
That's super interesting. What an exciting journey. Also from kind of AECOM to kind of more marketing to transitioning to change management. Really fascinating. So maybe you could share a little bit, what is change management? Why is it important for construction companies, and how does it relate to technology adoption?
Right, so change management is effectively getting us from where we are now to a future state that we have envisaged. So you work with the teams. This usually comes in construction, predominantly that will come from top down. So leadership will think about where they want to be, and then they'll come to the team and say, this is where we want to be, how do we get there? And then someone like me will help map out the direction and the plan to get them across, including whatever training or communications will be. We analyze what the possible change out impacts will be for the employees, and try and mitigate against those impacts as we go. So that's what change management is effectively. It's project planning, but on a sort of sometimes a nebulous project, or sometimes it's very finite. Let's say it's a payroll project, or otherwise it's on innovation, which I also have worked on. So something like innovation, to bring it to the sort of the tech side, we had a concept where we know, because of the buildings industry, you have so many intelligent people. Like, we have brilliant engineers and architects working behind the scenes who are constantly problem solving. And some of their ideas are utterly brilliant. So what we are an ideas generating company. Just the industry we're in, there's constantly a new idea coming in, and we're like, how do we share that information? But also, from inception to scale, what are the steps that we need to do? So sort of change management plan with that would be, you break it into your phases. So how you stimulate and create ideas, where you're looking for leadership to generate an environment where employees are comfortable and they have a channel that if they have an idea, that they can bring that, they can surface that idea, and they can work with technical teams. And it's usually, developing differentiated solutions for our clients. That's where it evolves from. Then after that, we would take it to a sharing and connecting and incubating stage with our technical practice leaders globally, and just identify, what's the feasibility. And then we would do an initial sort of market analysis with our client account managers. They're the ones who go out to our other clients and say, we've got this idea, we've got this solution to a problem. Do you think it applies to you? And after that, we do a business case. And if we want to bring it to scale, if it's not just going to stay within the team, if we've decided that it can, then we'll start putting some money into the product development and testing and protecting if it's suitable for scale. That's the preparation of a product brand and a marketing strategy. Then you'd move that into the adoption and the change management of how do you get the message out there, and basically you're bringing the product to market to try to make sure that you have all the stakeholders that you need, and you've assessed the market correctly so that you go into a product launch and then effectively sales, which is where we all want to be. But for example, we've got two software as a service products that we brought to market. One was Pipe Insights, which is in sewage systems. And it basically, on a basic level, means that we can use smart CCTV. So that when our engineers and are looking at the sewage systems, they have an intelligent feedback loop through their CCTV, because we've developed the machine learning adaptations within that. So that's kind of on our AI side. And another, which is a softer field, would be Plan Engage, which helps all our teams connect on a cloud platform that can share videos, training videos, and real time on the project. So that helps sharing of information, and also to build the fabric across our company. So you have real-time updates on all the projects. So it keeps the information flowing, communication flowing, and the feedback loop in real time.
It's super interesting. And a lot of times when I'm thinking about change management, are so many different variables that feels that goes into these projects. You have the stakeholders, you have the employees, you have processes that really can have a ripple effect on so much more than that. Is there, I'd say, a more challenging component? Like, who's the most challenging component out of, I'd say, everyone that you have to work with on a project?
Well, I think the one thing that I bring is that I've lived in very many countries and in very many cultures, because I think that is often underestimated, especially when you're doing a global project, how different countries and cultures deal with change and the processes that they'll have. I mean, one of the dangers is the assumptions that we all think, when the directive comes from above, there's a few assumptions in there that we're all working the same, and that is not the case. So it's working with individual countries, also understanding how they work. So they still feel engaged, because the moment you have a disengaged team, you're lost. It's all about communication and bringing everybody on the journey together. So understanding how the culture works and letting them have some agency, being flexible, because a lot of times a project fails because of slow adoption, poor planning and forecasting, delays, and trying to make sure that when you're working with the countries, that you look specifically to see how that could impact this project and who you should work with and who you should connect with to get on board to make sure that your project is a success.
Okay, super interesting. There's so much more to dive into, but I'm trying. I'm going to try to to hold myself back. So there'll be an end at some point to the episode, but it's really fascinating. So what would you say is unique to construction companies when it comes to change management, if there is an aspect that's more unique?
Well, I don't know, but it will have something that is the project base. Because it's finite projects, you will always have that's always an issue for construction, like especially when you think of employees. Like when you bring people on board to do a project, what do you do when that project finishes? And then how do you keep, if you can't keep those people on because you're waiting for a different project to come on, how do you keep that skill set within AECOM? I think that is one of the biggest challenges. I don't think we're alone in that, but I think it's something that is very much at the forefront of what we do.
Really interesting. So if I'm understanding correctly, it's more the project time frame or a project-based work, and that will have an an effect on the people involved in the project. What will happen to them afterwards? How do the skill sets or how do you preserve the capability in skills? Oh, it's super interesting. Okay, so what are the greatest hurdles holding back innovation in the construction industry from a change management perspective or generally?
The hurdles are always, resource. I mean, you can have the best idea on the planet, but until you have the money and the people to put it in, that is always going to be, just generally, one of our biggest problems. Slow adoption, resistance to change. People do not like change. I've spoken to you before about how the brain is naturally resistant. So people are always looking at ways that they can avoid change. So getting people to engage and believe in what you are selling to them. And effectively, I'm a saleswoman with some project management. It's like, this is what we're going to do, and I need you on board to do it. So cost overrun, slow adoption, deadlines, especially when we're rolling out globally, we have timelines for each country, and then the team will move on. So it can be very tight. But there's also a lot of fun too, because it means that every time you go into a new country, you have a whole different way of working, and you get to meet new people all the time, and form bonds and create friendships with your colleagues, and get to know what makes people tick. I think we had one lesson where we were 3/4 away through a project on a global rollout, and we had a crisis. And it was our first one that we'd had. I think it was our 7th country or something. And the hard work of working with that team meant that we had such a high level of trust that in the 3 days that we had to take to fix an issue, they didn't resist us. And when we first started working with them, they were like, what's coming? The country MD was like, what, why should I do this? Is there any risk? And by the time that we did have a crisis happen, we were all a team and we all worked together. There was no finger pointing, and it was all very successful. So what seems difficult at the beginning in dealing with a resistance to change, a resistance to someone who's new, can actually turn into a positive when you've turned that round and turned it into a successful relationship.
It's super interesting. I love that you just referred to trust as being an essential component that maybe help expedite or help make sure everyone's on board. How does trust play a role in change management?
Yeah. So trust plays a role, I think, by being a good communicator and being an active listener. And we did this interesting one project I was on a couple of years ago. We were looking to see how we could train people to listen. And it is so hard. I mean, you can Google it, you can look on YouTube, you can read the psychology books, and it really is quite an intuitive skill. And it's very hard to teach, and it's a soft skill that's very underrated. So if you listen and then answer and deal with your team's frustrations or successes, when they feel that you're someone who actually gets them and you understand what their issues are. Whereas if you bulldozer in and just sort of nod and go, yeah, this is what we're doing, you'll get nowhere. But that's symbiotic. It's got to be a conversation, but the active listening, I think, is the key part to it. Active listening and communication.
Okay, wow, super interesting. So the first part of this is really understanding and being a good communicator and a listener. I guess also to the team, but for everyone involved, like what is, if you'd bring it down, and I love asking this question, but someone who's involved in change management, what are the three most critical skills that they need to have to be good at this?
Good leader, good project skills, good communication. Maybe we should replace good with excellent. So to be an excellent one, you need excellence in all those.
I love it. Okay, so now we're going into the next question, which is, what do you think the future of the construction industry is going to look like, and how can technology help shape the future?
Digitalization. I mean, it's everything you do. It's so exciting. I mean, even like 3D printing, radically changes what you can do. Digital twinning, that is now major part of our industry, so that we can map out. We've got in both spots what's actually happening on the build. AR, VR, so you can take it from concept and make it a reality before it's built. I think it's very much the excitement is in what's happening on the digitalization highway. That has radically changed our industry and will continue to do so.
Really interesting. So what would you say is the best advice you can give construction professionals, maybe either early on in the career or even midway? What advice would you give them if they were come and say, I'm interested in getting into change management, or I'm interested in leading change in our company?
I think it's to get a basic level of academic knowledge in change management. I think there's been so much work done in the last 100 years or so that has been developed on the psychology side and the academic side, that there are now frameworks, and those frameworks are tried and tested. And every now and again, someone new will come in and sort of tweak. But there's Costa wrote his 8 steps, which he then developed further. But I think there are 8. I'm questioning myself now. But it's the framework of how to do it, and it's to clearly note your vision, to have your volunteers, your army, as he calls them, so that it's all about maximizing engagement and then embedding the change before you walk away from the project, making sure that it is still there. So anyone new coming into it, I would say learn the fundamentals, and you can qualify. There there are courses, either diplomas, which take a bit longer, but certificates, there's professional bodies, but it's reading and understanding it. But I would say I would really try and take a professional interest, and if not, a mildly academic one. But the frameworks are there to be used, and accessible to everybody.
Super interesting. So I actually have a question that's a bit out of left field, where it's actually kind of more, I'd say our audience really kind of divides up to the construction professionals, the startups. So the startups are the innovators, trying to come up with new ideas, and investors in this space. And I think that this is a really unique opportunity for startups to maybe hear your perspective on how they should even approach construction companies with a new innovative idea. That's going to require a ton of, probably like the biggest component of whether or not they're going to be adopted or not is probably going to be change management. What would you, if I'm a biz dev or an account executive at a startup company, what would be like the recommendation of how to help lead the adoption of a product in a company?
Well, I think it would all depend on why the product was developed. What was the background for that product? If it was to provide a solution to a specific need, then we struggle with this internally ourselves. So we go out to market by contacting our clients. All you can do if you're new is try and build word of mouth and network like crazy to say that you have a solution to this problem, and make sure that you're doing targeted marketing to those people in industry that you think will use your product. But I think it would all come from why the product evolved in the first place, because a lot of us can have brilliant ideas, but if the market's not ready and there's no need, it won't be used. So I would say, hopefully, if there's a solution, then you're looking at projects that you think need that solution.
Okay, so I want to thank you very much, for the insights. I think they're invaluable. A lot of people here are going to get a new understanding of a concept maybe totally foreign to them. So I really want to thank you for getting on the podcast, and thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.